everyone, and welcome to another episode of Worth a Listen. I'm your host, Chris Haney, and today I'd like to have a discussion with you about some career advice. Are you struggling to integrate into your new workforce? Are you looking for a new job? Are you a recent college graduate who's just struggling to find that first career for them? Well, today I'd like to discuss those topics and more with you. Joining me today is going to be the Director of Career Services for the University of Mary Hardin-Baylor, right here in Central Texas, Don Owens. Hey, Don, welcome to the show. Introduce yourself for us.
Well, certainly. I serve as the director of the Career Center at UMHB and have the best job on campus where I get to visit with students and talk about their interests, what they like, and how that applies to their calling and their work in their life's journey. And so certainly we've been doing that for several years and enjoy getting to encourage students in their career planning.
So how long have you been the Director of Career Service?
25 years.
25 years. Was that your only job? Did you do anything before that?
No, I'm one of those guys that I graduated with a business degree and was involved in community development as a Chamber of Commerce manager for many years. And then came back to the university as a development and a public relations marketing officer. And then the bulk of my career, 20 years, I was a banker for a community bank and did that for many years, and then went in to this position.
Okay, so tell me what you love so much about being the Director of Career Services. Why has it kept you around for 25 years?
Well, I think is hopefully contributing and being an encourager to our students and our community successes. So many times students come somewhat aware of what's out there. Even all of us today, we don't know what we don't know. Say that student's parents were all educators. Well, that may be all they're aware of as far as what mom and dad bring home from work every day. So they may not know what other aspects of careers look like. And so just to see that light come on and that student say, oh, I didn't even know that was a job. You mean I could do that? I could really see myself doing that and making a contribution.
Well, that's fantastic. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today. It seems like you have been, for lack of a better term, around the block quite often. You have a lot of experience, and it seems like you yearn to give that experience to some of our younger generations.
Well, I think it's important that we always have mentors, whether we're just out of college or we've been in a career 10 or 12 years, or even at my age, is having someone to bounce things off and learning, new resources and new ways to do things.
Yeah, so some of the most stressful times I can remember in my own life, and I know a lot of people listening are in the same boat sometimes, is we're either early in our career, we're just graduating from college, or we're kind of mid-career, in between jobs, looking for that next step. Being without a job or trying to get a job is, and correct me if I'm wrong, some of probably the most stressful time periods in someone's life. Will you agree?
I would agree. So many things, certainly I think psychologists have listed 3 or 4 biggest aspects in a person's life. Getting married, loss of a loved one, losing your job, finding that first job, and determining what is your calling in life.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned some of those stressors, because having a job, getting a job may sometimes be like dating. We as a candidate are looking for a job that we're going to love and want to be a part of for the long time. And a company is looking for that person that's going to fit their mold, fit their model, fit their culture, and be a partner together. So it is a lot. Leaving a job too, companies feel that loss, that grief of losing and losing good talent. So let's talk about that, and let's try to break down and make it more simple and talk about some of the things that we would advise some of these folks who are looking for jobs. So the very first thing I want to get into is job searching. What is your advice on searching for jobs? Where would you go? What would you do to just start looking for work?
Well, I think the job search is the primary piece, is your strategy. But I think a lot of it has to do with you doing a little bit of research, understanding what are you really looking for, and kind of building you a little checklist of either the industry or evaluating your skills and maybe things you have certifications are, and then looking at companies that have those type of jobs. Many times, one of the exercises we encourage our students to do is think of 2 or 3 companies you admire, and then go look at their job board. And just start looking at their array of jobs. Even though you say, well, I'm not going to go to work for Disney. I'm not going to go to work for IBM. But I'm just curious. I think students are always shocked to see the type of jobs that companies, I think of like Texel. You have so many great jobs that you wouldn't normally think about a financial organization having those type of jobs. And I think that's the important part. So you do that. Then you use different resources. There are a lot of job search engines out there. That's only a small piece, but that's a big piece. With artificial intelligence and the way social media is going, things are changing every day as far as how you look for a job. The way you look for a job probably 24 months ago is becoming a little different today. So certainly part of that is building a presence, either through a LinkedIn account or different resources where some of those companies can find you. So part of it is just building a list of companies that you admire, looking for job descriptions and find those that fit you, and then start applying.
So when I'm applying for jobs, one of the things that I like to advise folks to is to be very realistic about your qualifications. When I'm reading job postings and I'm looking at their bullet pointed lists, it's almost a let me check the boxes. Can I do this? Have I done this before? Would you advise as someone who is looking for a job, would you advise them to stay away from jobs that don't match their skill set 100%?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I certainly think many times when I talk to students about building their resume and their credentials, you either target or semi-target that resume towards that company, the job description, and then try to highlight skills or certifications that you possess. Now, certainly, if it says do not apply if you do not have a master's degree, but it says prefer certain things, I don't know that if the majority of those skills and areas line up with you somewhat, doesn't mean you have to be an expert, but they do line up. I encourage students to apply. Certainly, don't confess, I don't know how to do that, but certainly be straight, say, well, I don't know how to do that, or I do not have that certification, but I have this experience, and I think with a little bit of tutoring, I can be very successful in that product.
So when I'm composing my resume, your suggestion is to compose a resume catered to each specific job that you're applying for?
Very much so. Certainly with application tracking systems and AI, a lot of companies are going to use some format of eligibility scanning in that initial, whether they do it through a software package or they do it where you just look at every resume and the recruiter looks at it for about 5 seconds and they're looking for only key things and they're stacking them in the rows that they're going to come back and look at that full document. So being sure that it's relatable, either targeted and list specifically, showing examples of things that you've accomplished that somewhat relate to that. Might not be in the same industry, the same software, but it's an area that's transferable, that shows you are a go-getter, you're capable, you can read, you can implement, and have success.
So let me ask you a question too, because a lot of times, when even I look at resumes and I'm reading through them, sometimes I'm reading through a bullet point and it's got a bullet point that says optimize process improvements 10% YOY for 25-26. Is that something that I should be putting on my resume? And if it is, why should I have it on my resume?
Yes and no. Many times the section of a resume is going to be skills. You go to a job interview, employer looks at resumes all day. Consistently, if the person has researched the position and it says you have to be a good communicator, certainly they say, well, what are your skills? Well, I'm a good communicator. I'm a hard worker. I'm very capable. Well, don't we know everybody else are saying those same things? So what you're trying to do is set yourself apart and showcase in either a little narrative or in your answer. For example, they say, what are your skills? And you know you've got to be a good communicator. You would say, well, I feel like I'm a great communicator. By that, I mean recently I researched, I wrote, and presented a PowerPoint presentation on sportsmanship for 100 members of FCA. So when you can quantitate and quantify, you can't make that up if you haven't done it. And that's what, in our opinions, that a lot of recruiters are looking for, proof in the pudding that you can do certain aspects.
So I tend to agree with that as well, and I also caution our listeners from using those inflammatory or those self-boasting bullet points on their resume, because there may come times when you're sitting across from someone being interviewed and they look down at your resume and they ask you, you wrote this, and they quote your bullet point. Can you unpack that? And I've seen it before where this has happened and you get almost a deer in the headlights look. And that speaks volumes to a decision maker on whether or not what you put down on your resume is accurate and reflects you as a true candidate. How do you feel? So I'm going to ask two different questions here. The first one's going to be, how do you feel about resume formats? What kind of advice do you give students on resume formats?
So many students have to turn in a resume real quickly, and they don't start on it till the night before it's due. So they Google it. They instantly find a template, and Microsoft 365, Google Sheets, all of them have great starting points. I have no problem with the student using them to start the process. They may not have ever had to draft one, so they don't know what it looks like, what they should include in that. So certainly, I'm very positive about some of those system formats. However, artificial intelligence cannot read a lot of those materials. Either scanning, either if you have graphics or you have boxes, it may not read your information. And so you could submit and never be discovered that you've applied for the position. So certainly those formal templates are good to get started. But I say simply build you a Word document, pull in those key factors, make it where it's easy to read, quick bullet points, quantitative aspects of things that you do that showcase things that you can prove. You're right. If you say, okay, I see on there I have to do Excel sheets. Well, I know how to spell it, but I haven't actually done one. I've known a lot of employers that you get to a certain point and they say, oh, I see you, would you go over there on that PC and build a little simple spreadsheet? Busted. Mm-hmm. So there's no sense of faking it. If you don't know, don't confess, well, you're probably going to hire me because I don't know how to do that. But showcase what you can do.
And if you are a quick learner and you're a self-starter, you can always speak about that in the interview.
Exactly.
That this isn't something that I have been specifically exposed to in my career. However, I have done XYZ that is tangentially it's similar, and I have the skill set to transfer over into learning this. Exactly. One of the things I also want to make sure folks understand is people that read resumes every day, your format sometimes is seen. Decision makers, resume readers, recruiters, your format has never been, it's not unique. We've seen it before. I think one of the lowest hanging fruits that I could give as advice is stop giving Indeed printout resumes. Stop giving that format. That format also doesn't necessarily work really well into ATS systems. That parsing gets a lot of things incorrect. And if you do parse your resume into an application tracking system, you want to go through the application and to make sure that that parsing software did not misplace words, did not misplace characters or format different things. It didn't misrepresent your job title. I've seen resumes before in an ATS where it's their name, but under their name, it was a job title, but the job title was a different than what they had. And so their first job pulled that job title, and it just wasn't reflecting accurately. So it creates some confusion in decision makers' minds. Now, how do you feel about AI writing resumes and creating bullet points for you?
Well, certainly there's a place for AI. From everything I'm seeing in trends and other career coaches and even recruiters across the board, they're somewhat hesitant of when they get a document, who really wrote this? Did the candidate write this, or did AI, or did a headhunter? We were talking about like formatting, and certainly, okay, I'll just use this format that Indeed, and Indeed's a great organization, and they do have a great resource. But certainly, you want to prove to that employer you're diligent, you're an adult, you can do things creatively and from scratch. It's kind of like using a template whereby an employer thinks, everybody's using that same template. Can't this student sell themselves and be creative in showing it in an effective way of having to use a blank? Basically, a template is a blank form. You're filling out your information. LinkedIn, for example, I'm not a big fan of people, and people may disagree. You can drop a little slogan or tagline under your name, say "Open for Work." I'm not a big fan of that. I think that looks desperate. I think even though you are looking for opportunity, I'm not a big fan of showing that. Show what you have and let them say, these are skills I'm looking for. I'm going to contact you.
Okay. So now let's talk about putting yourself out there, going to those interviews, maybe job fairs. Now we're going to search. Do you suggest only searching online? Indeed, LinkedIn, Career Builder, those type of websites. Is that where you would suggest us go?
Those are some great resources. Several years ago, statistics, and they may be a little different now, statistics showed that probably only 66% of students got their first jobs or their leads through search engines. That the majority of them, especially that first job out of college, was through networking and connections, of getting better acquainted with your professors, getting better acquainted with those supervisors that you did your internship at, your classmates, maybe people that came and spoke to your class, people that you've gone to church with or you've grown up knowing in the community in a professional or just a community aspect, the Chamber of Commerce, the banks, different organizations. We don't know. It is important what you know, but I think it is important to realize there are people that are aware of needs of organizations that without a conversation, they might say, oh, I wish I'd known you were looking for that. Funny story on networking. Several years ago, my son and I wanted to go to Augusta to the Masters Golf Tournament. So we finally bought tickets. We went. So my wife works in Sunday school and was talking to the young man that helps her. And he said, well, how did Don get tickets to that? She said, well, went online, bought it. Said, I wish I had known my mom and dad live in Augusta and they get tickets every year and do not use them. I know that doesn't make sense, but you never know. And again, I know sometimes we say, well, I don't need someone else's help. It's not that you're needy. It's not that you're capable. It's just good sense to be professional about it and say, well, I'm about to do this. I'm just looking for resources, that sort of thing.
So your suggestion, and you think that in-person networking still has a place in the job search?
I do. And getting yourself in position of areas where you're going to rub shoulders with people, whether it's a mixer or could be any, whether a community event, a chamber activity, a church organization, something like that, local service club or something like that. just get to know people in the community. And it is what you know and who you know, but it's also who knows you.
That's super interesting, and I like to agree with that quite a lot because if you think about it nowadays, we're in a digital world. Our younger generations want to interact digitally. My kids will never answer the phone if I call, but text messaging all the way, and so I think that extends even into their job search where I can do this. It's digitally available to me. Let me just get out there and put my digital persona, my digital self out there. But you're leaving off the table the absolute power of face-to-face interaction. I can think of several times going to job fairs, doing networking kind of things where I gain and create relationships that are very strong in person versus trying to foster and develop relationships online. You may develop a relationship online, but the power of a face-to-face relationship is so much better. That's why I think job fairs are some of the best places to go for looking for talent and for putting yourself out there. Can you talk to me a little bit about job fairs and why you feel job fairs would be a great thing for job seekers to attend?
Well, I really do. And from the aspect, it forces you to get up front and personal with professionals that are seeking great talent. And I almost many times saying there's different types of interviews. There's the in-person application interview, there's the virtual interview, there's the behavioral interview, and then there's the informational interview. A job fair is almost like an informational interview. It is two-way street where you're learning about companies and job opportunities that you might not otherwise aware of. So you're sizing them up, and that person behind that table is sizing you up. And you just can't fake the chemistry or the personal persona that a person in person presents. And a person real quickly says, get his name before someone else hires him. We want to talk to him right away before he gets out of the room.
You're absolutely right, because at times companies may find somebody at a job fair who just blows them away and wants them at the company and will creatively find a position or a spot for them to grow. Let's get in a little bit to that interview piece. So, job fairs are kind of that entry interview where you're having that meeting, but I still need to sit down and talk to you formally. In the interview process, what are some of the suggestions you may have for folks interviewing?
We always say the most successful interview that results in a job offer starts way before the interview. So certainly research. As you find those companies and those jobs that you're applying for, HR has called and set up an appointment. So certainly find out as much as you can about that organization. Look at their website, look at their history. Maybe if they've just been named an outstanding healthcare or financial services in the state, or if they've just added a new branch or a new organization. Kind of be aware of that. Then look at the job description very clearly. Understand what the tasks are, and then kind of practice. Start working a little snippet of information that you can showcase your transferable skills that show you have the skills and talent to carry out many of the requirements of that position. And then practice. In front of a mirror, we do practice interviews in the Career Center, video it, go back and look at the video, and you'll say, I sure didn't close my eyes. Camera never blinks, so it will certainly show some things that you may not realize that you're doing that takes away. Interviews, everything is an impression, first impression, the way you arrive at the interview, the way you treat the receptionist. A lot of times that receptionist might get to vote. HR might say, what were your impressions of those that came in today? Well, Mr. Jones was very polite. I think he would be a great candidate. Now, Sally Jones, she just complained about everything. And even if you did get good information, you've got to rise above that and show that you're the best thing. The other thing, maybe ask the receptionist, who will I be interviewing with today? May I have a business card? Maybe pronounce their name, and if it's a little awkward, be sure you pronounce it correctly. Then, after the interview, certainly have that business card and maybe send a thank you note if it's a company that impressed you and you really like to be a part of it. Certainly, part of that research and practice is also to sell yourself and show that you're the best candidate, but also ask 2 or 3 questions at the end.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned those questions at the end. Sometimes, when that question is asked, the interview ends because, no, I don't think I have any questions. I don't think that's the right move to make. Do you, Don?
I don't either.
What do you think we should ask questions at the end of the interview for?
Well, certainly, the interview is you are there to make the best impression. You want to showcase you're the best candidate. So you think, okay, this is a dog and pony. I'm the parade. I've got to show that I fit check all the boxes. But in some essence, yes, that's a 95%. But the other part of it, you need to learn a little bit about the company. Is that a company that you really think you would want to go to work for? Again, there's a lot of due diligence before you do your final acceptance. But certainly ask 1 to 4 questions, something about the company, something about maybe what their expectations for that person, that position in the first 90 days. Are there opportunities for advancement? Is there encouragement for career development? Maybe working on a master's degree. Does the company have reimbursement programs or tuition encouragement programs?
Tell me about your time off policy. What about your 401k matching? What type of employee perks do you give?
Exactly.
I think the reasons why these questions are very powerful is because it gives you the ability to check those boxes off. You went through your job search. You have a checklist of your needs and your wants to make your life happy in a job.
Right.
Why not ask those questions in the interview? Because if you don't ask them in the interview, then you get offered the position, you start, and all of a sudden you find out that while on the face this was great, but I forgot to ask these 3 very important things to my heart, their work-life balance. And now I'm in a situation where I have buyer's remorse.
Right.
And now I'm looking for another job again and restarting the process. So let's talk about those needs just for a little bit. Work-life balance needs are a big deal, and the companies really focus on work-life balance. But, time off is not just work-life balance. Do you have any other suggestions about what we should look at for work-life balance if it's not just time off?
Well, certainly that involves a lot of areas. I think as the student does or the candidate does their due diligence, learning about the culture of the company. Is it a family atmosphere? Is it pretty strict and 7 to 5, the company owns me, and I'm going to be the best that I can be. So certainly, I think part of that decision making and part of that life work balance is certainly feeling comfortable that the organization matches kind of your values. Again, you want to be 100% company person and be professional, but certainly you want to be in an environment that you feel that fits you somewhat. If it doesn't fit your personality or some of your values, issues, you may never be comfortable.
Absolutely. So now that we've got a job and we're in our early career, I want to talk about integration, getting into the company and starting out. I remember myself as a young man. I was at a retail environment in my early career. I remember looking at those district managers and those leaders and thinking, boy, man, they're so try hard. They sit here and run these meetings and they're so happy all the time. These people are not, oh gosh, what are these people doing? And it took me a while to realize they are integrated. They bleed the culture. They love their job. They come to work happy every day. And here I am, a teenage guy, just trying to get through my 7-hour shift. And I'm not even, I don't even understand what integration means. Here I am 25 years later talking about integration and why it's so important. What advice, Don, do you have for our young career folks? How to integrate? What do you do?
Well, certainly, I think a lot of people, instant gratification is something we talk about a lot. And certainly, any position you go into, your first job is not going to be your last job in some cases. Now, I'm one of those that fortunately had 2 careers that I was in them over 20 years each. That's kind of a rarity now, but it doesn't mean it still doesn't happen. I think part of it is feeling that you buy into the mission of the organization. You learn as much as you can, go the second mile, do more than expected of you, and show that as you learn about the company. And I think part of it, a lot of orientation programs will allow new candidates to work in every area of the organization, because it's important for that new professional to understand how each department work and depend on each other being professional. So I think understanding from A to Z how that organization works, even though that's not their area, and take pride in that, and have the relationship that I buy in. And if I see something that I want to learn more about, I approach my supervisor, say, hey, this is something that I want to learn more about at some point. Is there opportunities for me to be exposed to that in my career? And I think having a good dialogue with your supervisor, a lot of times they may not know that you ever had an interest in that. So you almost have to be your own advocate, even though a lot of managers want you to grow. They want you to be better than them and grow with the company successful. But you also need to let them know of areas that you want to grow if there's opportunity.
Awesome. Well, Don, hey, I really appreciate you joining me for this discussion today. Before I let you go, though, I'd like for you to give our audience just your final summation of advice. What advice do you have? If you could sum up this conversation in just a couple sentences, what advice would you give to our career?
I think many times none of us are very good about bragging on ourselves or evaluating what we're capable of or what we have done. So I think I just encourage everybody to get a legal pad and kind of do a biographical sketch of themselves. You know, everything from something they did in elementary school to junior high and high school and college, and organized volunteer activities, different activities or things that maybe they struggle with that they overcome. And I think it's important to be humble, but at the same time, if you don't sell yourself or share some things that you're capable of doing, nobody else is going to do that. And a lot of times that verbal presentation it makes the difference. Surveys have been done over the years of HR people. How long into the interview do you know if you're going to hire that person? The statistics we've gotten is that a majority of HR people are saying within 2 minutes, we know if we're going to hire that person. Now, I say, wait, I didn't get to tell you my story. But we're human nature. We've all had professors, and we know real quickly, this is going to be a interesting course or it's going to be a sleeper. So just be yourself, but don't be bashful to showcase what you can do.
Well, awesome. Well, hey, Don, thank you so much for coming out today. I really, really appreciate you coming and talking about these different topics like integrating into the workforce and landing that new job. For you folks out there, thank you again for coming in and joining me for this time. If you have any questions, comments, leave them in the comment box below. We'd love to hear from you to let us know how we're doing. And as always, I really hope today was worth your time.